Welcome to the broadcast, my friends. Hasn't it been a fabulous week for Catherine Wales, or should I say the Princess of Wales? Our Catherine Wheel has been bringing gaiety to very many events this week and showing off different sides of her capacity, but this time it was in her role as Catherine Wheel. She joined a training session at a sports centre in Hull, and she left the England coach jolly impressed by her skills, actually, after she scored a conversion at her very first attempt. And as you can see, she's still nursing an injury to the finger that she damaged while she was bouncing around on trampolines with the children. But let's hope that's doing better. Tom Coyd said, Catherine took to manoeuvring the chair really quickly. I'm not just saying this because it's her, but it's the first time I've ever seen anyone score a conversion at their first attempt. She was a natural and blew me away, to be honest. Catherine was marking Rugby League Inclusivity Day, wearing Lululemon trainers at the feet and earrings by Spells of Love, those twist hoops she likes to wear to the lobe. And this young lad was adorable, wasn't he? And he gave our princess quite a shock. He snuck up behind her, sneaky, and then tickled her from behind, saying boo. And the look of astonishment there soon turned to joy, didn't it? Because the best moments, I feel, are never planned. They can't be planned in that way. Such a natural, joyous reaction. And how can you not fall in love with Catherine in the aftermath of that and her wonderful reaction? So jolly. Spontaneity leads to gaiety. And we were treated to an artificial intelligence projection of how Princess Charlotte will look in the future. What do you make of this one? You might be able to see flashes of both Catherine and William, but also Diana and the late Queen and Princess Anne, all kinds of people. Thankfully, not Uncle Harry. Speaking of which, we hear that the Duke and Duchess of Not Muchness are to return to New York. Oh, aren't you so excited? My fruits of the Big Apple. Yes, they're coming back to see you. When? Tuesday. Yes, just a few days away. Take cover. This will be for Archerwell's first ever in-person event. Oh, yippee-doo-dah, yippee-doo-dah. Why does People magazine have to trumpet this? Because it's People that were provided with these exclusive whispers just for us, from their press people. Who cares? Who cares? They're not royalty. They're not anybody, my dear. Why does it have to be trumpeted? But it's going to provide a platform for parents who are navigating mental health challenges in the digital age. Well, that sounds like a barrel of laughs, doesn't it, my dears? They're going to host the Archerwell Foundation Parents Summit, Mental Wellness in a Digital Age. Try not bullying people. Try not bullying the late Queen and all her family. And we might take you seriously. Now, listen, if the focus is on protecting children, if they have genuine substance to what they're claiming, and they can help them navigate social media and all of that, well, that's to be applauded. But it depends what their proposed solutions that we hear, or interventions, might lead to via the Aspen Institute and all sorts of sinister arrangements, where, of course, one could say that they're merely battling with the Walesers who have been approaching this for yonks. Yeah. The Royal Foundation Task Force, do you remember? We've seen them many times on the prevention of bullying. We've seen them at Buckingham Palace. We've seen them with Google, because these are figureheads and these are world leaders in the making with our William and Catherine. Why New York has to roll out the red carpet for this pair of grifters, I just cannot understand. I cannot understand. Let's hope that the mayor isn't going to be getting involved this time. And incidentally, the Prince and Princess of Wales will be carrying out engagements to mark World Mental Health Day. Another day, another week that we've got to all remember. And this will be all up and down the country. So don't try and compete, my dear. Don't even try it. And by the way, do you remember that cosy cover of Time magazine's most influential people, most beautiful, sexy, most photoshopped people in the world? Remember that laugh? Time magazine has really had its time, hasn't it? It's had its day. That's got to be some sort of satirical publication, that magazine, after declaring them the world's most influential people. This week, just a few days ago, they named Scotland's First Minister, Humza Yousaf, one of their 10 trailblazers. Oh, he's right on the button. To explain to viewers abroad, or those who might not know, No, this chap leads the SNP, the Scottish National Party, who support Scottish independence from the United Kingdom. And I have fruits in the basket for this and against it. I happen to like the idea of our kingdom truly united together, so it's not really my cup of tea. But I'm not an expert on the topic, and I do appreciate all views on the subject. Now, when it comes to the idea of monarchy, the SNP have traditionally had a policy whereby they support it in principle. Nicola Sturgeon, who was Humza Yousaf's predecessor, supported it in principle. She said that it was a model that had its merits. And I will say that both she and Humza Yousaf were always and are being very respectful to the King and Queen as people. The late Queen and King Charles, they communicate well, they are respectful in tone, extremely respectful in some circumstances. So I really admire and appreciate that, especially with regards to Mr. Yousaf, who is actually a declared Republican, which is different to the American or any other kind of context of republicanism. I'm talking about people here who want a republic and no sovereign. Well, he's declared that he wants a republic. So the likes of me and most of you, my dear, didn't especially want him achieving great power in Scotland, because we want Scotland to continue with a monarchy. Can you imagine Scotland with no King Cosy Socks? Huh. No, my dear, perish the thought. Perish the thought. Well, what's happened, you see, is that there was a by-election just yesterday in Scotland, which is a sort of indicator between general elections. Our next main general election is in about 14, 15, 16 months' time. So it's not too far away, it's round the corner. But there was a by-election, and they were thrashed by Labour, not by Conservatives, of course, and the Conservatives didn't fare very much better either, but huge seismic shock, they're calling it, for the SNP. Poor Humza Yousaf and his hopes for a republic. I don't think so, my dear. Don't you know who you're messing with? No. So, as for time, I mean, they've really got their finger on the pulse, haven't they? You know, if they weren't in your bad books already, I'm sorry, but this is just embarrassing for Time magazine. A trailblazer? Where's he blazing a trail to, my dear? The Loch Ness? And, you know, Keir Starmer, the leader of our Labour Party here, is being touted as the next Prime Minister, because the Conservatives, after 13 years' rule, have performed so unutterably ineffectively and have let many of us down. And I never vote with great enthusiasm, I've got to tell you. There's never been a particular party or a particular leader that has drawn great admiration from me, far from it. So it's always with great reluctance that I do it, to be quite honest. But at the last general election, I did vote with some sort of gusto, at least, not because I especially liked the leader or the party, but because there was a mission to eradicate Corbynism at all costs, because it looked, if you were to believe the press, that Jeremy Corbyn was to get a shoe in, and that wasn't going to happen under my watch or the country's watch. So some of us had to vote in order to obviate or castigate. And that is usually the way when it comes to voting. For me, I'm afraid it's usually used as a sort of tactical vote. Not that I want it to be that way, but I don't want to waste a vote, so I have to vote in some capacity. And in the last general election, Corbyn needed obviating. Although I will say for Jeremy Corbyn, the thing I won't say like, but appreciate about Jeremy Corbyn is that, similar to a Margaret Thatcher, who I do have a great admiration for, similar to her, you knew what you were going to get with those politicians of yesteryear. Do you know what I mean? They weren't fudging around the middle like a Boris... we've got... what's his name? Sunak now. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. I mean, they're two sides of the same coin, aren't they, my dear? They're both sort of Labour light. It's hard to really tell one from the other. As people, I quite like both of them, I've got to say, Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak. And I really like the fact that, at least what you can say for Rishi Sunak, what I like about him is that he's brought a sense of grown-ups being back in the room and maturity. Certainly don't like everything about him or his policies, but I rather like that. It's like a grown-ups back in the room. But neither of them are like the characters of a Corbyn or a Thatcher, where you know exactly what you're voting for and you can rush in, or you could rush in and vote for, what they represent, what they stand for. And that, Maggie was not for turning. The lady was not for turning. And she didn't just say it, you believed it, and she didn't. And I think that it would have been the same with Jeremy Corbyn as well if he'd gone on to progress to be Prime Minister. I will at least say that for him. I don't think he would have been for turning either. And that's why people weren't going to let him in. And they didn't let him in. And half of the red side of the country turned against Labour and voted Conservative and gave them a great big thumping majority, which Boris Johnson then went ahead and used and abused. And you see where we've ended up today, my dear, with a complete and utter mess over the last few years, and a country that is going down the plug-hole after 13 years of Conservative Tory rule. We're in this woke mess, and they deserve to be punished, they deserve to be castigated. Now, as we all know, a year in politics is a very long time, so a lot can change. I don't make predictions about this kind of thing, how I'm going to think, how I'm going to feel. But at this moment in time, I certainly want to withdraw any sort of sense of approval or support after what we've ended up with after 13 years. They've blown all kinds of chances. And this mess that we're in with immigration, which is an absolutely obscene mess, and we have Suella Braverman harping on about it. She says all the right things at times, but she's all mouth and no trousers, that gal. And Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, with his smoking ban this week. You might have read about they're going to phase it out. It's going to become illegal for various ages to purchase cigarettes. They're not criminalising smoking, but they're following a New Zealand model, which was introduced because females of the Maori were greatly affected by smoking, which was brought over, when it was colonised. There were different reasons it was implemented in New Zealand, but Rishi Sunak has decided to bring it in here, and I'm disgusted by that again, because we elect politicians to govern, not to dictate. The line is being constantly blurred and the envelope being pushed back in the most undesirable way, month after month after, well, it seems every single week something coming along. This nanny state. I don't want to be dictated to. I don't want the youth of today to be dictated to about things like smoking, because if they're going to start complaining about the cost of smoking to the national health system, well, what about when I wander in there and there's a bunch of people who are in there for unhealthy choices that they've knowingly made, and because they wanted to, because they fancied an extra bag of chips or whatever it is. Obesity costs rather a lot more than smoking, if you are to believe some of the reports out there. I'm not trying to pitch one bad habit against the other, but obesity is rising. What about the cost of sugar and fat and alcohol? You're going to start outlawing the selling of them to certain age groups as well, because health, activity and nutrition, what I believe they should be focusing on is that sort of thing at an early age, rather than banning these things to grown adults at a much later stage. It's meddling. The whole idea behind conservatism, or at least what it used to be, is for the state to keep their distance and out of people's lives. Most of us, I should speak for the whole population, should I? But there certainly was a time when most of us didn't want a chaperone. We didn't want to be that sort of moralising over us by a government, let alone a Tory government. It's too much meddling. And the party itself is split. Suella Braverman was making headlines for her comments that multiculturalism has failed. And she's been both lauded and derided in the press for these comments. I personally think that it's a bit too nuanced to generalise, but speaking for myself, well, I've known the joy and the beauty of growing up surrounded by multiculturalism, and I was always enthused by it. But perhaps the wording that we've been sold, multiculturalism, is a little bit imprecise. Multiracial, yes. Multi-ethnic, yes. But multiculture, people have been asking the question, do multicultures really rub along together in harmony? Because my preference is for one combining culture, what's the word I'm looking for? One unifying culture that we can all live under harmoniously, being the basis for a nation. I think that it's rather essential. I think it's something that we're rather losing. Because initially, when the diaspora of empire began coming to our shores, over the years, we integrated and adapted and learned and changed. And things are going very well. But then in more recent decades, everything sped up. And no, I'm sorry, hundreds of different cultures living side by side on a tiny little island can't be expected to live harmoniously, especially going on long term. I think it's naive to think that that would be so, because you end up with tensions, you end up with ghettos and segregation, actually. It's the swiftness of the immigration that is the problem. Mass immigration all at once. You know, it's not as if it's being drip-fed over years. This is great hundreds of thousands coming all at once. Immigrants must enhance our society. If they're not going to enhance it, I don't want them here. I don't want to come and fracture our society, for us to regress socially. You come here on our terms. Yes, you should. People are afraid to say it because they're afraid of being seen a certain way, bigoted, this, that and the third, and it's absolutely ridiculous. We should have the confidence to be able to say what most people think, which is that if you're lovely, if you're life-enhancing, if your culture's life-enhancing, and would be on these shores, and you can compromise a little and adapt and change to our society and our civilization and the beauty of that, then yes, come. Come one, come all. But if you can't, stay away, and you're not coming in. You're not coming in if you're going to question our society or our law or the way that our communities have evolved, and you're not going to compromise and adapt. No. And to be clear, I'm not talking about those who are seeking genuine refuge or need genuine safe harbour. Suella Braverman also squarely placed the fear of being branded racist or illiberal for preventing the reform of the UN Refugee Convention. And Dr. Rakib Essen said the gravest danger to Britain's multi-ethnic democracy is not white British racism. It is the importation of tribal ideologies, fueling tensions between its minorities, whether it's American-inspired racial identity politics, subcontinental-style communalism, or Arab world sectarianism. Community cohesion in relatively diverse parts of the country is under strain. What had the Tories been doing over their 13 years in government? They have failed to cultivate a wholesome and inclusive civic nationalism rooted in Britain's tremendous heritage, and tremendous heritage it is. To top it all off, the latest annual net migration figures skyrocketed to an unprecedented figure of 606,000. As Suella Braverman said, it is too much, too quick, and the failed dogma of multiculturalism, she called it. And that's rather interesting, because it has become dogmatic, isn't it? We are told that we have to love, appreciate, want and support diversity and multiculturalism. I love variety. I always had done. As I say, I grew up loving being surrounded by different colours, different kinds, different creeds, different sexualities, different people. Well, to those who might have a problem with me criticising the concept of it, I would be so curious to know what they would think of asking all the different countries and cultures that these people are arriving from, to ask them what they think about multiculturalism, to ask them what they would think about our culture arriving on their shores. I was reading some commentaries from Nana Akua, who was talking about Kemi Badenoch's speech at the Tory conference, where she said that Britain is the best place to be black, and Nana Akua was agreeing with it. Kemi Badenoch, as you might remember, I was a very early supporter of in advance of the leadership contest for the Tory party. She was my favourite, even though she might be a little jejune for the position of Prime Minister, but it'll come one day, I suspect. But she moved here from Nigeria, so she knows what it's all about, and she is able to compare and contrast, as is Nana Kwa, who said, "I've travelled and lived all over, and I know the UK to be far better than most places when it comes to racism. In Britain, I've scarcely been exposed to aggressive, in-your-face abuse since the bad old days of the 1970s, but I have experienced exactly that sort of behaviour in France, where people of colour are often effectively segregated in rough and crime-ridden suburbs, as well as in Italy and Spain. In these nations so beloved of Remainers, I've been eyeballed by local people who spat out racial epithets and made me feel not only unwelcome but unsafe. I lived in the USA in my teens, and I would never want to be a young black person there either. During my childhood in Essex, I was the only black girl in my state primary school, and all my friends were white. Many of my boyfriends have been white, and both my children are mixed race to different dads. But in my experience, American blacks and whites tend to live separate lives with unequal life opportunities and little prospect of mixing. That's just not true here, which is why so many people risk their lives to come to Britain. We can see the success of integration all around us in the huge numbers of families who have accepted black and brown people with open arms, seeing them as a son or daughter-in-law without judging them for the colour of their skin. As the Prime Minister himself said today, he is proud to be the first British Asian Prime Minister, but even prouder that it's just not a big deal. So just to make it as clear as I can, I really don't care which country people come from. They can come from any country in the world they want to, if they come with a love and appreciation for this country, this society, our traditional religion, Christianity, even if they don't practice it. And I'm not even saying that I consider myself a practicing Christian, but that is a tradition of this country, and it has infused everything from our laws to our education to our society to our mores, and people should come with that kind of attitude and not expect it to change at the speed of light just because we are living in suddenly the internet age and the social media age with all great big pylons and this kind of thing. I really don't care where people come from, but just come bringing positivity and appreciation for what's already here. Otherwise, go somewhere else. This is the thing. And there are plenty, most of my beloveds, most of my friends don't come from these shores. I've lived many years in London, and for anyone living in London, that we are used to that. That is our lived experience. We're used to the multicultural fantasy, and most of us have enjoyed that. And our lives are populated with loved ones who have come to these shores from other ones. And it is them, along with those of us who have traditional British ancestry and heritage, it is all of us together who need to protect what we've achieved and what we've got from mass immigration and interlopers from other societies, cultures and regimes that just don't rub along very well with this one, with this multicultural society. I make no apologies for saying that. And that's not to say that there aren't lots of societies and cultures who do come here with positivity and enthusiasm and who fit in very well. Hong Kong is a recent one where there's been mass arrivals, large arrivals in the hundreds of thousands from Hong Kong. They bring something to the table, and they bring an appreciation for what's here, even though it's different from their culture. And I don't know quite as much about the Ukrainian people, but it seems that Ukraine is another one who bring a lot of good character to the table. And it was in Reading this week that the Princess of Wales met with the Ukrainian community at one of their community centres and a community hub in Bracknell. And just so you know, Princess Catherine was actually born in Reading, in Berkshire. She was born at the Royal Berkshire Hospital. Fancy looking hospital, isn't it? Rather nice. And she met with displaced Ukrainian families and heard their stories of fleeing the war. Some of them were very emotional. She enjoyed hugs with the children. There were some wonderful images, and they did some artwork together. It was heartwarming when one of the children wrote, "Kate, I love you." She was presented with traditional bread, which looks very yummy, doesn't it? And a lady, Galina, said it was very easy talking to her. She has a big heart. Her Royal Highness was presented with a posy of blue and yellow blooms. Very refreshing. and she wore a sleeveless funnel neck by Janie, which sold out as soon as she wore it. Wasn't it very nice to see something different on her from that uniform that we've been speaking of recently? And it crossed my mind that this is exactly the sort of look, really gorgeous, sort of slouchy, slushy look, exactly the sort of look that the Duchess of Sussex has been going for. She's been aiming for it, getting it oh so wrong and looking like a box of rags, a discarded box of rags, hasn't she? Some creature. Whereas Catherine just shrugs it on, trots around and looks effortlessly chic, gorgeous. Oh, if only Meghan could do what she does, but she cannot, as much as she tries and tries again. It's sad, it's pathetic, but rather amusing. Catherine also told her Ukrainian friends that little Princess Charlotte had been singing a hymn that morning in the house. Isn't that nice to know? That Charlotte has been enjoying church music. Very nice. Catherine helped package donations of essential items for refugees. Do you remember that young chap with a disturbed mind who scaled the walls at Windsor Castle and tried to assassinate Queen Elizabeth on Christmas Day with encouragement from his AI girlfriend? Well, he's reached his comeuppance because he's been served with 9 years, my dear. Sentenced to 9 years in custody for treason. Treason! Sentenced at the Old Bailey, ordered to be held in a secure hospital until he's well enough to complete his sentence in prison. It's quite sad, really. The last person convicted for... Well, actually, this was for high treason, which is a little bit more serious, but that was William Joyce, who collaborated with Germany during World War II. He was hanged in Wandsworth in 1946. It was off with his head. Grim, grim. King Charles took a tour of a sawmill to see how construction timber is produced as a renewable and recyclable building product. He studied the mill's main operating room and inspected its log sorting and flood defence systems. Here he is in 1958 being shown how to use a sawmill on the Balmoral estate. And while His Majesty played with the boys, Her Majesty Queen Camilla marked the International Day of Older Persons, revealing that a veritable flock of dancers has swanned into the Royal Academy of Dance for a series of workshops and presentations joined online by friends from across the world. As a devoted, if slightly creaky silver swan myself, she said, I very much wanted to send you my warmest wishes for a wonderful day of fellowship and fun, celebrating the huge benefits that ballet has brought to our lives. To borrow a quote, keep dancing, Her Majesty the Queen. This photograph of the Princess Royal really tickled me. I'm not quite sure why, but it did make me chuckle. She was visiting the Cornish headquarters of a family-run business, St. Hugh Eggs, to open their new grading and packing centre. I think I just sort of smiled at the thought of Princess Anne looking over her schedule and, what have we got this week? Oh, an egg factory. Wonderful. Yes, and also it put me in mind a little bit of... Do you remember that character in Pink Flamingo? John Waters and Divine. Pink Flamingo. If you haven't seen it, well, it's not for the faint-hearted, my dear, but it is certainly an iconic piece. It was the character of Mama by Edith Massey. She was obsessed with eggs. Eggs, 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 she would squall. Where's the Eggman? Please give me my eggs. Please, where's the Eggman? Eggs, eggs, eggs. I'm not really selling it to you, I expect, my dears, am I? But it is a lot of fun. But another good egg, Prince Edward, was at Brighton Hove and Sussex College. The Duke of Edinburgh met young volunteers for a local food charity, baking goods for local food banks. The charity is called Bake a Different Sussex. How I'd love to, my dear, if given the opportunity. Don't you think he looks adorable in his oven mitts? Absolutely adorable. And the baked delights looked scrumdiddly-umptious. The King sent a message to Italy. Dear Mr. President, my wife and I have been most shocked and profoundly saddened by the news of the terrible bus accident in Mestre, and would like to express our deepest condolences to the families of all those who have so tragically lost their lives and to those who have been injured. During our visits to Italy, we've always been struck by the kindness and generosity of the Italian people. Our thoughts, prayers, and heartfelt sympathy are with all those who have been affected by this appalling tragedy. Charles R. Yes, indeed, our thoughts and prayers are with you, our Italian tutti fruttis. They really are. And with that, I look forward to seeing you in the next broadcast. Leave me a juicy comment and my tip jar is in the description box. Doodle pip!